The night someone knocked on her door, she thought her husband was dead. Her hands started shaking before she even stood up from the couch. Her husband was late again. At first, she kept checking the clock every few minutes. Then she started checking her phone. Then she stopped checking completely because the silence hurt more than the waiting itself. He hadn't answered her last 3 calls. The dinner she cooked hours ago sat cold on the table untouched, just like every other night that month. She slowly walked toward the door while another loud knock echoed through the house. Her mind filled with terrifying thoughts. Maybe there had been an accident. Maybe someone came from the hospital. Maybe something terrible had happened on the highway. She unlocked the door carefully. A woman stood outside completely soaked from the rain. Water dripped from her dark coat onto the floor. Beside her stood a little girl holding her hand tightly. The child looked no older than 5. Neither of them spoke immediately. For a moment, all 3 of them just stared at each other while rain poured behind them. Then the stranger quietly asked, "Is your husband home?" The question felt strange instantly. Not worried. Not confused. Personal. She tightened her grip on the door. No. Who are you? The woman looked nervous. Her eyes moved around the house before settling back on her face. I think we need to talk. Every instinct told her to close the door immediately, but something about the woman's expression stopped her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't confidence either. It looked more like fear. The little girl suddenly peeked inside the house and whispered, "Mom, is this where Dad lives?" Her entire body froze. For a second, the world around her became completely silent. Even the rain disappeared. She looked at the child again carefully this time. The same dark eyes. The same eyebrows. The same tiny dimple near the mouth. Features she had seen every day in her husband's face. No, she said quickly, almost automatically. You're mistaken. But even she didn't believe her own voice. The stranger lowered her eyes. Can we come inside for 5 minutes? Please. She should have refused. She wanted to refuse. But something deep inside her already knew her life was about to split into 2 parts. Before this moment. And after it. She moved aside silently. The woman sat near the edge of the couch while the little girl remained close to her side. Water from their clothes stained the carpet, but nobody cared. The mother stood across from them, unable to sit down. Her hands were cold now. My name is Sarah, the woman finally said softly. I didn't know where else to go. The mother crossed her arms tightly. Why are you here? Sarah hesitated before speaking. Because your husband disappeared 3 weeks ago. The sentence hit her strangely. Disappeared? He came home almost every night. Maybe late. Maybe distant. But he came home. You have the wrong person, she said firmly. My husband works late. Sarah gave a weak smile that looked full of sadness instead of mockery. That's what he used to tell me too. The room became unbearably heavy. She suddenly remembered all the small things she had ignored for months. The secret smiles at his phone. The sudden business trips. The way he started showering immediately after coming home. The nights he barely touched his food. The emotional distance. The silence in bed. Still, she forced herself to stay calm. How do you know him? Sarah looked at the little girl before answering. We met 4 years ago. 4 years. Her stomach twisted violently. 4 years meant this wasn't some mistake. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't recent. It existed while she packed his lunches. While she celebrated birthdays with him. While she believed they were building a future together. No, she whispered to herself. No, he wouldn't do that. Sarah slowly reached inside her bag. I didn't come here to hurt you. The mother's breathing became shallow. I came because he stopped answering me, Sarah continued. And my daughter keeps asking where her father went. The child sat quietly playing with the edge of her sleeve, completely innocent in a disaster created by adults. The mother suddenly remembered the last conversation she had with her husband 2 nights earlier. Are you happy? She had asked him quietly before bed. He paused too long before answering. Why are you asking that? At the time she ignored the emptiness in his voice. Now it replayed inside her head like a warning she failed to hear. Sarah finally pulled a photograph from her bag with trembling fingers. I think you deserve the truth, she said. The mother stared at the picture as Sarah held it out toward her. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. Slowly, she reached for it. The moment her eyes landed on the photo, everything inside her collapsed. It was her husband. Smiling. Happy. His arm wrapped around Sarah while the little girl sat on his shoulders laughing. But that wasn't the part that destroyed her the most. It was the way he looked in the picture. He looked like a man completely in love. And she realized she hadn't seen that expression on his face in years. She kept staring at the photograph long after Sarah lowered it. Her fingers slowly tightened around the edges until the paper bent slightly in her hand. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too suffocating. Her chest rose sharply with every breath, but no air felt enough. This isn't real, she whispered. It was the only thing her mind could say. Sarah looked exhausted. Not proud. Not victorious. Just tired in a way that only heartbreak could create. I wish it wasn't. The little girl leaned against her mother's arm sleepily while the rain continued outside. Everything felt painfully normal for a moment, and somehow that made it worse. He told me he was separated, Sarah said quietly. He said the marriage ended years ago emotionally. He said he stayed because of your son. Every word felt like a knife pushed deeper without mercy. The mother shook her head immediately. No. No, you're lying. He would never say that. But even as she defended him, memories started crawling back one by one. All the nights he stopped touching her. The way conversations became shorter every month. The empty look in his eyes during dinner. The constant distance. She remembered how he used to sit beside her after work and talk for hours about nothing. Now he barely looked at her when he entered the house. Sometimes he would scroll through his phone while she spoke, nodding without listening. And somehow she accepted it. Because love makes people ignore the things that should terrify them. Sarah rubbed her hands together nervously. I didn't know about you until recently. The mother looked up sharply. What? He hid everything carefully. I only found out because I followed him once. The humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal itself. Another woman had discovered the truth before she did. He promised me he'd leave, Sarah continued. Every time I asked about the future, he said he just needed more time. The mother let out a weak laugh filled with disbelief. More time for what? Nobody answered. The little girl suddenly looked toward her and smiled innocently. Do you know where Daddy is? That single word shattered something inside her completely. Daddy. Not uncle. Not friend. Daddy. She looked away instantly because tears were already filling her eyes. She refused to cry in front of strangers. Especially strangers connected to her husband's lies. But her body betrayed her anyway. One tear slipped down before she could stop it. Sarah noticed immediately. I'm sorry. Those words almost made her angry. Sorry couldn't fix this. Sorry couldn't erase 4 years. Sarah couldn't explain why her husband came home every night pretending everything was normal while another woman waited somewhere else believing the same lies. "How long?" she asked quietly. Sarah lowered her eyes. "Almost 4 years." The answer landed heavily between them. 4 years ago was when her husband first started changing. That was when the late nights began. The extra work shifts. The emotional distance. She remembered asking him once if something was wrong. He kissed her forehead and said, "I'm just tired." Now she understood exactly where his energy had been going. Her stomach twisted painfully. She stood up abruptly and walked toward the kitchen because she felt like she might collapse. Her hands shook while pouring water into a glass. Half of it spilled onto the counter. Sarah remained silent behind her. That silence said everything words couldn't. The mother suddenly remembered finding perfume on his jacket once. A scent she never wore. He told her a coworker hugged everyone during an office celebration. She believed him immediately because trusting him felt easier than doubting him. Then there were the hotel charges on the bank statement. He claimed clients booked rooms for conferences. The deleted messages. The locked phone. The business trips that became more frequent every month. All the clues had been sitting directly in front of her while she desperately tried to protect the image of the man she loved. She closed her eyes tightly. "How stupid was I?" she whispered. "You weren't stupid," Sarah answered softly. "You trusted your husband." That sentence hurt more than blame would have. The mother finally looked back at the little girl again. The child looked sleepy now, innocent and confused, unaware of the destruction surrounding her existence. None of this was her fault. That realization made the situation even crueler. "When did you last see him?" she asked. 3 weeks ago, Sarah replied. "He said he needed to fix things in his life. After that, he stopped answering my calls." 3 weeks. That explained something else. 3 weeks ago, her husband suddenly started coming home earlier. He even brought flowers once for no reason. She thought maybe they were finally healing. But now it sounded like he was simply trying to clean up the mess before it reached his front door. A car engine suddenly sounded outside. All three of them froze instantly. The mother slowly walked toward the window and peeked through the curtain. Her husband's car. Her heart dropped so hard it physically hurt. Sarah stood up immediately while the little girl grabbed her hand tightly. Fear spread across Sarah's face now too. The front door unlocked seconds later. Her husband stepped inside quietly, removing rain from his jacket without looking up at first. He looked tired as usual. Distracted. Normal. Then he saw them. The color disappeared from his face instantly. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The mother walked forward slowly and placed the photograph on the table between them. His eyes locked onto it. Then onto Sarah. Then onto the little girl. And finally back to his wife. For the first time in years, she saw genuine fear in his expression. Not stress. Not annoyance. Fear. He opened his mouth slightly but no words came out. The silence became unbearable. Finally, he whispered, "I can explain." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time her voice stayed steady. "How many lies?" she asked quietly. "Were you planning to tell before I found out myself?" Her husband stood frozen near the door while rainwater dripped from his jacket onto the floor. He looked at Sarah, then at the little girl beside her, before finally facing his wife again. His lips moved slightly like he wanted to speak, but fear kept stopping the words. For years she had imagined what betrayal would look like if it ever entered her marriage. Screaming. Anger. Broken plates. Endless accusations. But the reality was far quieter. That silence hurt more than rage ever could. Their son slept peacefully in the next room while his father's entire secret life stood exposed under the same roof. "Say something," she whispered. He closed his eyes briefly. "I never wanted this to happen." The answer immediately shattered whatever hope she still had left. "Because innocent people deny first. Guilty people explain." Sarah looked down at the floor, emotionally exhausted. The little girl leaned against her leg sleepily, unaware that every adult around her was breaking apart. "How long?" the wife asked again. This time he answered himself. "Almost 4 years." Hearing it directly from him felt worse somehow. More real. More permanent. She laughed quietly through tears. 4 years. Her voice cracked. "You lied to me every single day for 4 years." "I tried to end it," he said quickly. The words made both women look at him sharply. "Tried?" Sarah repeated with disbelief. He rubbed his face nervously. "I didn't know how to fix any of this anymore." His wife stared at him like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. "So instead you created 2 families?" "I never meant for it to become this serious." Sarah suddenly let out a painful laugh. "You told me you loved me." The room fell silent again. His wife felt physically sick hearing another woman say those words to her husband. But the worst part was his silence afterward. Because silence sometimes confirms everything. Finally, he spoke quietly. "I cared about both of you." "That's not love," his wife said immediately. "Love doesn't destroy people like this." He looked down at the floor without arguing. For the first time, she noticed how tired he actually looked. Not tired from work. Tired from carrying lies too heavy for too long. Dark circles sat under his eyes. His shoulders looked heavier than before. But instead of sympathy, she only felt anger growing stronger. "How did you manage it?" she asked coldly. "How did you come home to me after being with her?" He swallowed hard. At first it wasn't supposed to continue. That's what all cheaters say. Nobody denied it. He slowly sat down like his legs could no longer hold him. "I met Sarah during a difficult time. We started talking. I felt understood." His wife almost laughed again at the excuse. "Understood," she repeated. "You had a wife waiting for you every night." "You stopped talking to me too," he said softly before realizing his mistake. Her expression changed instantly. For a second, even he regretted saying it. "I stopped talking," she whispered. "I begged you to talk to me. I asked what was wrong for years." He couldn't answer. Because she was right. She remembered countless nights sitting beside him asking if he was okay while he stared at his phone. She remembered trying to plan family dinners, vacations, conversations, anything to save whatever distance was growing between them. Meanwhile, he had already given those missing parts of himself to someone else. Sarah suddenly spoke again. "Tell her everything." He looked trapped now. Like every lie he buried was finally demanding air. "There's more?" his wife asked quietly. He hesitated too long again. That hesitation terrified her. "We rented an apartment," he admitted finally. Her stomach dropped instantly. An apartment. Not hotel rooms. Not random meetings. A real place. A second life. Sarah closed her eyes painfully while he continued speaking. "I paid for it secretly. I told myself it was temporary." His wife sat down slowly because dizziness suddenly overwhelmed her. Images filled her mind immediately. Another kitchen. Another couch. Another version of him laughing somewhere else while she sat alone at home wondering why her marriage felt empty. "How many times did you leave us to go there?" He stayed silent. That silence answered enough. Tears finally rolled down her face openly now. Our son waited by the window for you some nights. His eyes filled immediately with guilt. But guilt changed nothing. She remembered birthdays he missed because of work emergencies. School events he skipped. Anniversaries forgotten. All those moments suddenly had a different meaning now. Another woman had been receiving the version of him she kept waiting for. Then Sarah quietly revealed something unexpected. There's something else she should know. He looked at her sharply. Sarah. No, she said firmly. No more lies. The wife looked between them both anxiously. Sarah took a deep breath before speaking. The little girl might not actually be his daughter. Silence crashed across the room again. His wife blinked in confusion. What? Sarah looked ashamed now. I was seeing someone else briefly before him. The timeline was always unclear. Her husband lowered his head immediately. You knew this? His wife asked him. He nodded slowly. 4 years. The shock completely changed the atmosphere. So you destroyed our family, she whispered, for something you weren't even sure about? I thought she was mine, he said quietly. And by the time doubts came, everything was already ruined. Sarah wiped tears from her face. I didn't tell him the truth sooner because I was scared he'd leave. Nobody in the room looked innocent anymore. Not him. Not Sarah. Not even love itself. The wife suddenly realized something heartbreaking. Every person standing there had been lying to themselves in different ways. Sarah lied to keep him. Her husband lied to keep both lives. And she lied to herself every time she ignored the truth sitting directly in front of her. The little girl yawned softly, exhausted from a night she would never fully understand. That tiny sound broke the tension for a moment. The wife looked at the child and felt anger disappear briefly beneath sadness. Children always paid for adult selfishness. Always. Hours passed slowly after that. Sarah eventually stood near the door preparing to leave. She looked emotionally destroyed now, completely different from the woman who first arrived earlier that night. Before leaving, she looked at the wife quietly. I never wanted to hurt you. The wife nodded weakly, but said nothing. Because pain didn't care about intentions. After the door closed behind Sarah and the little girl, the house became painfully silent again. Her husband remained sitting alone on the couch staring at nothing. For the first time in years, she heard him crying quietly. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just broken. She stood frozen in the hallway listening to the sound of a man finally collapsing under the weight of his own lies. Then her eyes shifted toward the front door. 2 packed bags sat beside it. And suddenly she realized something terrifying. By morning, one of them would be gone forever. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photograph again. Her husband smiling beside another woman like he belonged there. The image replayed inside her mind over and over until sunrise slowly pushed pale light through the curtains. For a few seconds after waking up, she forgot everything. Then reality returned all at once. The affair. The lies. The little girl. The packed bags near the door. Her chest tightened immediately. She sat up quietly and looked toward the hallway. The house felt unnaturally still. No television. No coffee machine. No footsteps. Part of her expected him to already be gone. She slowly walked out of the bedroom while her son continued sleeping peacefully behind her. The silence inside the house felt heavier than shouting ever could. When she entered the living room, she stopped immediately. Her husband was still there. He sat on the floor beside their son, who had apparently wandered out earlier and fallen back asleep against the couch. One of his small hands rested on his father's arm while he slept comfortably beside him. Her husband looked exhausted. Not from lack of sleep. From finally facing himself. His eyes slowly lifted toward her, but neither of them spoke at first. After everything that happened, words suddenly felt too small for the damage between them. She noticed the packed bags were still near the door untouched. He followed her eyes and quietly said, "I couldn't leave without talking to you honestly first." Honestly. The word almost sounded cruel now. She crossed her arms tightly around herself. "You should have done that years ago." He nodded slowly because there was nothing else to say. Their son shifted slightly in his sleep, and both parents instinctively looked at him at the same time. That simple movement hurt more than the entire argument. Because no matter what happened between them now, an innocent child would carry the consequences forever. Her husband carefully stood up without waking him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the room that once felt safe. This house had held birthdays, laughter, family dinners, bedtime stories, anniversaries. Now it held secrets so heavy they poisoned every memory attached to the walls. Finally, he spoke quietly. "I became someone I don't recognize anymore." She didn't respond. Because part of her believed he always was that person. He had simply hidden it better before. He rubbed his tired face slowly. "At first I kept convincing myself I could fix everything before anybody got hurt." "You already hurt us," she said instantly. His eyes lowered again. "I know." "No," she continued softly. "You don't." That finally made him look at her fully. "The cheating hurt," she admitted. "But that wasn't the worst part." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time she didn't stop them. "The worst part was waking up every day beside someone who stopped loving me while pretending everything was normal." His expression broke completely. She kept going because years of silence were finally pouring out at once. "It was every dinner I ate alone. Every excuse you made. Every time I asked what was wrong and you made me feel crazy for noticing the distance." He looked like each word physically wounded him. "You know what hurt the most," she whispered. "I kept blaming myself." The room became painfully quiet. "I thought maybe I wasn't enough anymore. Maybe I gained too much weight after pregnancy. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I stopped being interesting to you." He shook his head immediately. "No. Never. But you let me believe it." That sentence destroyed whatever strength he still had left. Tears rolled down his face openly now. "I'm sorry." She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I think you are sorry," she admitted quietly. "But being sorry doesn't erase what you did." He nodded again slowly. For the first time since the truth exploded between them, there were no excuses left. No blaming work. No confusion. No pretending. Just consequences. Their son suddenly woke up groggily and looked between them both sleepily. "Dad?" Her husband immediately wiped his face and forced a small smile. "Hey buddy." The child hugged him without hesitation. That simple innocent love nearly shattered both parents completely. "When are we having breakfast?" the little boy asked. Neither adult could answer immediately. Because normal life no longer existed inside that house. Later that morning, after their son sat distracted watching cartoons, she finally looked at her husband one last time. "What happens now?" He stared at the bags near the door before answering quietly. "That depends on you." She already knew her answer hours ago. Maybe even years ago without realizing it. The hardest part about betrayal wasn't losing another person. It was losing the version of yourself that trusted completely. And she could never become that woman again. A long silence passed before she finally spoke. I forgive you. His eyes filled with hope instantly. Then she finished the sentence. But I can't stay married to you. The hope disappeared from his face immediately. Still, he nodded because deep down he already expected it. She walked closer slowly. I don't want our son growing up thinking love is supposed to feel lonely. His breathing became uneven as he listened. I spent years begging for pieces of someone who should have given me honesty from the beginning. He looked completely broken now. But this time she understood something important. His pain was not her responsibility anymore. Hours later, he finally picked up the bags near the door. Their son noticed instantly. Dad, where are you going? The question almost destroyed the room. Her husband crouched beside him carefully, struggling to speak. I'm gonna stay somewhere else for a while. Why? No answer felt safe enough for a child. The little boy looked confused more than upset, which somehow hurt even worse. Her husband hugged him tightly for a long time before finally standing again. Then he looked at her one last time. Not expecting forgiveness anymore. Not expecting another chance. Just silently accepting the life he destroyed with his own choices. A few seconds later, the front door closed behind him. And the house became completely silent. The first few months afterward were brutal. Some nights she cried after putting her son to sleep. Some mornings she woke up angry all over again. Sometimes she almost called him just to hear a familiar voice before remembering why she couldn't. But slowly, life started changing. She began working again. Started laughing occasionally without guilt. Started sleeping peacefully some nights. For the first time in years, she stopped feeling invisible inside her own life. One evening months later, she sat helping her son with homework when another knock echoed through the house. For one terrifying second, her heart froze exactly like it had that rainy night. But this time the fear disappeared quickly. Her son ran excitedly toward the door holding a paper in his hands. Mom. Look. I won the school award. She smiled as he threw his arms around her happily. And standing there in that quiet house, she finally understood something. The knock that destroyed her life had also saved it. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't end a person. Sometimes it wakes them up before they disappear completely.